Okay, I think we are ready to get started. So welcome everyone to the second in our series of webinars about the Pinellas Cares Local Business Grant. Today we'll be walking you through the documents that you need to apply for this business grant. I think you'll hopefully find this very useful. These are some of the questions that we received the most during the first round of funding. So we'd like to provide this not only as a webinar today, but we'll be recording this webinar and it will be available on YouTube so that you can look back on it as a reference. Today's seminar will last about 30 minutes. And we'll walk through it. Mike is going to walk you through the documentation as well as the W-9 and the financial requirements, as well as the proof of legal operation that is necessary to apply for this grant. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A feature there. Please, as we're going along, feel free to put your questions there. And what we'll do is we'll collect them. And then after Mike has completed the overview of this section regarding the documentation, we'll answer the questions that you have there. I'll read them out and then Mike will answer them for you. So the most useful part we think is the question and answer section. So I want to encourage you to use that section. So we'll answer as many questions as we can. This initial session will take about 30 minutes and then we'll end at 3 o'clock. Hopefully we'll get through as many questions as we can. Please keep in mind that next week on Tuesday, September 15th at 10 a.m., we'll be concentrating on how to submit a complete application. So I hope you'll all join us again on Tuesday. And then once we've completed all 3 webinars, those will be available at the Pinellas County YouTube channel, and you can look back on them and reference them. What I'm going to do now is walk us through so that we're all on the same page with the screen share. So what I'd like to do is have everyone start on the page, and I'm going to read it out slowly. It's www.pced, as in Pinellas County Economic Development, .org/cares, C-A-R-E-S, F as in Frank, A as in Apple, Q as in Queen, FAQ. I'll share my screen now and we will all hopefully be on the same page. So you can see my screen here and I am on the FAQ page. Again, that's pced.org/cares FAQ. From here, we are going to scroll down to the part of the application where it passed the eligibility that we went by last week. And here where it says the application, click the plus sign and it will open up. And here we'll talk about the documentation. The first thing you're going to need to do is gather your documents before you apply. So let's click this. Takes us here to a separate section of our portal, of our website for the CARES Local Business Grant financial documentation. At this point, I'm going to turn the mic over to my boss, Mike Meidel, Director of Pinellas County Economic Development, and we are going to walk through the financial requirements. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, Stacy. And thank you all for joining us today. We're going to run through today just the detailed documents that you'll have to really have ready before you begin the application process. It'd be best to have them already scanned in and ready electronically because you will be uploading these in the application portal. All but the first one, we'll talk about the W-9 information. A W-9 is a federal tax form, an IRS form that indicates the address of your organization and your taxpayer identification number. And we'll talk about that a little later, but that is a critical component because that is what we need in order to mail you a check. And so you'll want to have that information handy. Now, you will not have to fill out a form separately and attach that form. This time we have built that directly into the application. So in effect, by filling out the application in the portal, you will have completed a W-9 form. So keep that in mind. We'll go into more detail on that at the end of this conversation. But next, we'll take a look at the proof of legal operation. Now, first of all, we're going to need to know that you're abiding by the basic regulations required of your municipality and or the county or state. So the first step in that process is if you are in a municipality, and that would exclude the unincorporated county, obviously, but it also the cities of Bel Air Beach, Bel Air Shores, Indian Shores, and Redington Beach do not have a business tax receipt requirement. So everybody else, though, if you're within the city limits of any other city in Pinellas County, the other 20 of them, you will need to have a business tax receipt. And there's a city department in each case. You can check your municipal website if you haven't already done so. But as a business operating within those city limits, you're required to register with the city and fill out a form and usually pay a small fee, depending on the size of your business and your business type. But it's that receipt that you receive after paying that fee that you'll need to upload into that document. Now, if you are located in one of these 4 communities or in the unincorporated area, we don't have that document. So what we'll ask you to do in that case is go to a website called Sunbiz, which is operated by the Florida Division of Corporations, and that's just SUNBIZ, and put that into your Google box and it'll take you right to it. And what you'll need to do is, if you've already registered, you just go prove that you have an active registration, and there'll be information there built right into the application that show you how to get there. Plus the frequently asked questions include a section on that. So you can go to a link, take a picture, a screenshot, or download that particular document and have that ready to upload back to the application. Now, you're only required to register with Sunbiz if you are a corporation, a C Corp, a LLC, limited liability corporation, or you're operating under a fictitious name. So if you're operating under your own name, say you're an independent artist or performer, or every time you talk about your business, it's only your name, then you aren't required to be registered on the Department of the Division of Corporations. Then we go down to the next level, which we would look at if you're of a profession that is required to be licensed by the Florida Department of Professional Regulation, and these would be hairstylists and those types of personal services people. And it's really well known within professions, the requirements there. So you can check with that Department of Business and Professional Regulation. And if you're required to have a license, you just give us a copy of that, scan a copy of your license. The Department of Health really more applies to hotels and restaurants in particular. But the hotels are required to be registered with the Department of Business and Professional Regulation. So you can definitely just use that certificate. If you're a charter boat captain taking people out on a fishing or sightseeing cruise, you can use your captain's license from the U.S. Coast Guard. Other than that, if you're selling items for resale, you buy a product and you sell it to the public, you will have a Department of Revenue resale certificate, and that can be utilized. And ultimately, if you have none of the above, which is possible, particularly if you are an artist or a performer and you're providing a service, so you don't need to collect sales tax, what we'll have to do there is you can actually work with your reviewer when they contact you, because you will not have attached those documents, but we'll need some kind of attestation that you are not required to regulate in any way with any of those agencies. And the other choice is, if as we move down into the tax documents, we'll go into greater detail on this, but the Schedule 1 basic tax return, you will have to provide us with information that you actually had a sales transaction prior to October 1st of 2019, and then also at some point in 2020. So that proves that you were in business prior to COVID, you've been an ongoing business concern, and that you were ready to roll, and you are still a legitimate business that has not closed their doors permanently. because one of the requirements of the entire application is that you attest that if you're not open now, you will open when the law allows, for bars and restaurants, for example. So that is the documentation we'll need, and most of you will already have those documents and know exactly what to do. If you're not required to have any of them, your reviewer will get in touch with you and make sure we have all documentation necessary. So with that, the next document that you'll have to have is a tax return. And ideally, it would be your 2019 tax return, which in most cases, by September 15th, the business returns that are operating on the calendar year will be required to have been filed, even after requesting an extension. And a personal return will have to have been filed by October 15th. That is if you're operating on the 2019 calendar year. Now, some businesses operate on a fiscal year that's different from the calendar year. That's a little bit difficult. We ideally would like to have your 2019 return at the end of your fiscal year. And if that occurs at some time before December 1st of 2020, then I would recommend you wait until your return is done, and you'll be able to be eligible, especially if you have more than $17,000 in income, you'll be eligible for more money by waiting and using the sliding scale grant. But if your return is sometime like in the end of the year or mid-December, you may choose to apply for the microgrant program. And even with the microgrant program, you will be required to have filed for an extension to your 2019 taxes or have filed an amended return before we will be able to award a grant. Now, your grant reviewer in the microgrant program will work with you, and particularly if you've never done a tax return before, we'll hook you up with a CPA we'll spend up to $1,000 on services to the microgrant individuals that don't have tax returns. So that should be sufficient to get your tax return filled out by a CPA and have that document ready to attach to your application. Now, that'll take several weeks to organize, so you'll apply and you'll make it clear that you don't have that return yet. But what we would need at the point you apply is a profit and loss statement. So just a statement of all of your revenues for the year by category and all of your expenses, their major expenses for the year, a basic statement of your profit and loss. So that would be attached. And then the reviewer would work with you on the microgrant program to develop that tax document that would be attached and then ultimately would be submitted to receive the microgrant cash award. Now, those cash awards are reduced slightly from the sliding scale grant because of that extra cost of preparing those documents, but it's still very worthwhile, and it helps set you on the road to understanding your business finances, your income and outgo, and it'll help you to do better as a business in the future. So we strongly recommend that you work with that reviewer to get those documents. If you're unable or unwilling to provide those documents, then you will be denied for the grant, and your application will be removed from the system then. So that's the basics. When we look at the different types of tax returns, the most common type of tax return on a business basis is a Schedule C. That is a separate form that's filed with your individual tax return. This has been around for decades. So most businesses that are sole proprietors or an individual single owner LLC will report their income, their business income, on a Schedule C. And again, that is just an attachment to your regular 1040 form. Now, if you have a small amount of income and you've been reporting that business income under the category of other income on your Schedule 1, which is now your basic 1040 form, Schedule 1, then we'll use that document to move you forward, but it will we will have to document again that you had invoices that were paid to you during, one before October of 2019 and at least one in 2020 to show that you've had that income, and you'll have to show bank statements or deposit slips that show that that money actually went into a bank account, and that will document to us that you had that income and were operating as a business. And we would encourage you in the future to set up a Schedule C that makes all of that very clear and helps you to get a better handle on how your business is operating, and your ability to make money will be greatly improved by having those documents and to have that knowledge of how your business is operating. The third type is a limited liability corporation or a C Corp, which is your standard corporation for like most major businesses are C Corps, but they would file a return on an 1120 as a C Corp or 1120S as an LLC. And you'll be familiar with those forms. If you have that type of organization or structure to your business, you will have been filing those forms already, because it takes time and effort to become a C Corp or an S Corp or an LLC. And you will definitely know if you are one because you've worked hard to get there, and you will have been filing that 1120 form. But that is the form we're looking for. We're not looking for your individual tax form. We're only looking for the business tax form. So that's what you would attach to the application. And then finally, if you're a partnership structure, the Form 1065 will need to be attached. And again, you will know if you've been structured as a partnership, because you will have had to document that with the state of Florida, and you would have to have worked with a lawyer or be very good at that kind of thing yourself to apply those articles of incorporation and be ready to go as a partnership. So that Form 1065 would be the document that you would attach. Now, if you do not have the tax return, again, this is just kind of going over what I already mentioned, but you will have to have that 2019 profit and loss statement if you don't have a current year 2019 tax return. And by the time that you finish the process and working with your reviewer, you will have had to have filed an extension to your 2019 return with the IRS, or actually amended your 2019 tax return to show that business income. So we're going to get you to the point where you are on good terms with the IRS and you are aware of your financial situation as a business. And the microgrant program is designed to help you get there. Now, most people will already have every form they need, but I just wanted to make aware, depending on the structure of your organization, which form would need to be attached. Now, once you've attached, you're aware of that tax form, we can go back and look at the W-9 information. And this is a separate section on your application form, but you'll want to have your tax return handy when you go fill out this part of the W-9 information section of the application, because everything that you put into the box in that section must match your tax form exactly. So, as we go through, we'll look at each type of business structure, and you'll know what to put in what box there. It'll be fairly clear this time, because you're filling in a box one at a time, prompted by an actual question that pretty much makes it clear what you need to put in that blank. But I'll go over that today just to give you a refresher course in that. If you're filing a Schedule C as a sole proprietor or a single member LLC, then you'll put your own personal given name into the W-9 form, not your business name. So if you're doing business as another name, in that first square, you put your personal business name, your given name, Joe Smith, as it appears on your tax return. And then in the next box down, there's a doing business as square in that box B2. That's where you'll put the name of the business that you operate, that the public knows you as. Now that will only be used if you use a doing business as on your tax return. So be sure that you get that information correctly, but that with a Schedule C, you put your own personal name in the first box and doing business as in the second box. And then on B4 of the application, you're going to put the address to which you want the check to be mailed, that grant a check. Now, the trick is that you have to have matched the tax return form. So if you have moved since filing the tax return form, we'll have to document that with the reviewer and let them know that, and we'll have a separate document showing your move and change of address and whatever. But initially, we need to at least have the W-9 match that tax form. And that'll be critical. We'll mark the other change of address within the document and make people aware of it. But in most cases, we're not going to have that problem. You'll use exactly the address that was on your tax return, and where you would have received a refund check from the federal government is where we will send you the grant check. And then finally, your taxpayer identification number on the W-9, in this case, if you're filing a Schedule C, will be the Social Security number that is on your tax form. So that'll be you or your spouse, depending on who's actually on that Schedule C form, whichever Social Security number appears there must appear in this W-9 section. So that'll help you. Now, if you're a partnership, filing a Form 1065, you will need to fill out you'll have a drop-down menu, first of all, to select the type of LLC that you are. And there are two types, and if it's a partnership, you'll just need to check that box from the drop-down menu. But then you'll put the legal name of your partnership as it appears on your tax form in that first box, in the B1 box. And you'll sometimes it's an entirely different name on the front of your store or on your business card. So whatever your doing business name is, that's what goes into B2. And then finally, the B4, again, has to be the address that's on your tax return. Again, that's where you would receive a refund from the IRS, is the same place you would receive the check from us. And the taxpayer identification number in this case is your employer identification number. That is a separate number. It's not your Social Security number. It's a number that you've created in conjunction with the IRS, and that will be on your tax return. So put that number into the TIN box and not your personal Social Security number. And then if you're a C Corp or a limited liability, well, actually, let's look at the C Corp separately because it's a little bit different. So if you're a full-blown corporation and you're filing an 1120 form, then you would use the drop-down menu to choose the C Corp option. And then you'll put the legal name of your corporation as it appears on your tax return. Will go into the B1. And again, the doing business as goes into B2. B4 is, again, the address, but it has to match the address on your tax return. And then, of course, the taxpayer identification number there is also your EIN, and you do not use your Social Security number at that point. Final type of corporation is the limited liability corporation and or an S Corp. There are two different kinds, but either way, you use the drop-down menu to choose the right type of 1120 S corporation, and you put the name from your tax return. We're seeing a pattern here. You're doing business as, and then the address from your tax return. And then again, your taxpayer identification number needs to be your employer identification number instead of your personal Social Security number. So, and all of those, as you're going through the application, we'll step you through one box at a time. And just the key is just remember, have your tax form in front of you and fill in exactly what's on the tax form. With that, I think we've covered all of the documents that we really need to attach, other than we talked about at our last webinar, there is a grant available for target industries. This is a health and safety matching grant. And for that award, you will have to submit a separate summary sheet that basically summarizes all of the paid invoices and the proofs of payment which you would have to attach as separate scans, but we'll have one summary document that each line in a spreadsheet will be a different invoice. You put in the amount paid, the date that you paid it, and the description of the expense, and then total that up. And then that document would have to be submitted in its own separate documentation section of the application. And then you'll have to scan all of those invoices and receipts so that we have documentation that you paid for that equipment and how much you paid. And then you will be eligible for up to half of that to be reimbursed. And those, for those who weren't on the last call, that is for target industries, which are manufacturers, financial services, IT companies, call centers, corporate headquarters. These are companies that do 51% or more of their sales to customers who are located outside of Florida. And you'll have to attest to that in the summary sheet. So unless you have most of your products and services are sold to customers outside of Florida, you will not qualify for the health and safety grant. You'll have to attest to that in that and sign to that document in the summary form, and then you'll have to provide those receipts if you meet that qualification. So those are the only documents that need to be attached this time around. We don't need any staffing requirements or any other documentation, but you'll want to have those documents ready really probably before you even start the application so you can go through all in one setting. With that, I'll turn it back over to Stacy and we'll see what kind of questions we have.
Great, Mike. We have a few questions, and the first one is I think this question, they're probably going to try applying for the micro grants, which was something I was going to actually ask a little bit about. If all of this, and Mike sort of went into it, seems like you don't fall into any of these categories, you may want to try our micro grants. So the specific question was, can a business started right at the time of the restrictions and the shutdowns qualify for the grants?
In general, no. This is intended to be businesses that were unexpectedly impacted by something they had no clue was coming, and that's why we set that October 1st date. We wanted to have a business that was already an ongoing concern prior to October that had, and that October date allows 3 months of income and operations within that tax year so that we can use your tax document to determine your award. And then we want to also make sure that you hadn't closed your doors before the COVID impact, and that's why we want to see some business activity in the first quarter of 2020. But if you've started your business after COVID was already a pandemic, then we cannot have it qualify for this grant because the federal sources are intended to help people that were unduly and unexpectedly impacted by COVID.
Perfect. Thank you. So as a follow-up, if that's the case, could you qualify for the micro grants, or does the same apply to the micro grants?
No, the same dates apply for the micro grants. You will have to meet all of the same criteria that you would for a sliding scale grant and that you would for a micro grant. The biggest difference is the sliding scale grants end at $17,000. If you made less than $17,000 a year in 2019 on your 2019 tax return, and that may only reflect a few months of operation if you started business in October, before October of 2019, you may only have 3 months of expenses. But if that doesn't meet $17,000, then you'll have to go to the microgrant program. And if you didn't get at least $4,250, you won't even qualify for the microgrant program. So in order to be eligible, you have to have at least $4,250 in 2019 tax year income. The other reason for applying for the microgrant is that if you haven't completed your 2019 and filed your 2019 tax return, then you'll have to go that route. You'll have to show the extension document that you filed with the IRS and your 2019 profit and loss statement. And then the reviewers will work with you on getting the additional documentation. And you can always apply for the microgrant if you feel like you need help. And the helping filling out the application or help in producing your tax return, or if you want help with marketing and learning how to do QuickBooks, how to do a website, we've got the ability to provide up to $1,000 worth of services to those microgrant providers. So you may be better off trying to get those services, and then once that's done, getting a smaller cash award and put you in better shape for growth as a business in the future.
Great. Mike, thank you very much. This seems like it might be a good time to also mention that we do have assistance for individuals and families. So even if you don't qualify for these business programs, please visit the Pinellas County website, our main website at pinellascounty.org, and there you'll find assistance for individuals and families. Also, the business grants aren't the only way that we can assist you during this crisis. So I just want to make sure that everyone's aware of these other resources. That takes us into our next question, which is from one of our listeners who is a home daycare provider. On the application under general business sector, the closest option was education. However, under the eligible business type, there's not an option. So what should I select? This is a great question. I'll let Mike, but we're going to send you a whole different path if you're a daycare provider.
Exactly. Daycare, childcare, adult daycare does not qualify at all under the business grants. And that's because those agencies were considered essential by the governor's orders and were allowed to remain open. There's no doubt that you were impacted. Many of the parents were required to stay at home. They couldn't go into the office, so they stopped daycare for their children and took care of them at home. We do recognize that. And the way we've chosen to address the childcare element of it is if you are a registered childcare agency with the state of Florida, and that includes the home-based. You can register and license as a home care, child care provider, and usually you have to have a capacity of 6 children or more, but you can register with the state, and then you would qualify under a separate program on child care agencies that is being operated by the Early Learning Coalition of Pinellas County, and you could Google that organization and work with them to become licensed if you aren't already. If you're already licensed, they did try to reach out to you, but it could have gotten caught up in your spam filter or whatever. But if you are a licensed agency, then you do qualify for a grant through the Early Learning Coalition, and just get in touch with them, and they will send you a check it'll be the county clerk's office, just as it is with our program, but it is a separate portal into the system. And the best way to do that is to reach out directly to the Early Learning Coalition of Pinellas County, and they'll work with you on that. Now, if you're not a licensed facility, you will not be eligible under that program at all either.
Thank you. That's very clear. And I'll just read out the website for anyone who needs it. If you are a child care facility, please contact, as Mike mentioned, the Early Learning Coalition. The website is elcpinellas.net. And there you'll find more information for our child care providers. We realize that you are certainly an essential part of our community, taking care of our children, and that's how we've chosen to help those providers there. With that, I am not seeing any further questions in the Q&A box. I'd like to invite anyone with us here today who would like to ask more questions to put them in the Q&A box if you would like. If you are joining us by phone, and I see we do have one more question, so let me jump in there and grab that. How can applicants reach the microgrant application? What would be their first step for that?
Okay, you would go in, it's all one portal for the sliding scale grants, for the artist microgrants, and for the business diversity microgrants, and for those target industries that are applying for their receipts for the safety and health of their employees. And that can be the easiest way to find all of this information is really go to www.pced.org/cares. And that'll take you right to that homepage, webpage, And as you scroll down, it says apply now. It's right there, a beautiful blue button. You click there and it'll take you right into the application. There'll be an introductory page describing the program. And then as you work your way through the application, there'll be a drop-down box where you choose the particular program, the micro grant program, the sliding scale grants, or the target industry matching grant program. There's a description of each of those programs right there on that page. And so you just take a look through those paragraphs and apply for the one that makes the most sense. Now, your reviewer, if they look at all your documentation and say, well, they probably really didn't mean that, they'll be in touch with you and make sure you're lined up with the right program. But you'll be able to get a good description of it there and apply directly for that microgrant program if you're interested.
Great. Mike, thank you very much for that answer. I'd like to invite anyone joining us by the phone who cannot put their question in the Q&A box. If you would like to hit *6 at this point, I will try and call on you so that you can ask your question if you're joining us by telephone. We'll wait a minute for that. And while we wait a moment to see if there are any further questions, I would like to invite everyone to join us again next Tuesday, September 15th at 10 a.m. You'll use the same link you used to join us today. And Mike will be helping us to walk through the application. We'll be walking through a document that's going to look just like the application, all the steps of it, and help you through that way. We think it should be very useful. Again, that'll be next Tuesday, September 15th at 10 a.m. Last call for questions. Okay, great.
Great.
Mike,
thank you
very. Thank you.
Bye.